What's up, everyone? Welcome to Fam Sports New York Varsity. I'm your host, Frank Langella, joined by my co-host, Marcelio Langella. And Mars, this is our Week 3 preview for Section 1B, 1C, and D, and the Hudson Valley Football League. Can't believe it's already Week 3 already, and we've gotten some really incredible matches over these last couple of weeks and some good matchups this week. But before we get into it, Mars, I want to welcome you to the show. How's it going, brother?
Yeah, it's going well, man, and the fact that we are already in Week 3 is actually kind of crazy. We've already had a lot of great games so far this season, and I'm really looking forward to see what Week 3 brings us.
Absolutely. I want to welcome our audience. We appreciate you guys joining us once again, and if you're new, what took you so long? But we're happy you're here anyway. We cover, obviously, Section 1 football, and if you like this content, please give a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel. It really helps us out. And what's going to happen on this show, we're going to go over the games on slate for this week, and then we're going to break down. I have 6 breakdowns that I want to do of some of the top matchups, and then at the end, we're going to pick all the games. But before we dive into all that, we just want to say, again, you can get our content on our website at famsportsny.com, and if you'd like to donate to our cause, you can get access to our Patreon in our description below and at our website. Again, we really do appreciate any donations of any amount from our fans. It really helps us grow our channel, and we really appreciate it. But since that's all done, let's get into it, Mars. The games on slate for this week. In Class B, we have Ardsley at Nanuet. For the Hudson Valley Football League, we have Peekskill at Walter Panis. Another Hudson Valley Football League, Kingston, who is out of Section 1, is at Tappan Zee. We have Hastings at Edgemont in the Hudson Valley Football League game. We have a Hudson Valley Football League game, Spring Valley at Greely. A B matchup, Pearl River at Head Hud. A Hudson Valley Football League matchup, Port Chester at Poughkeepsie. Another Hudson Valley Football League, Ramapo, is traveling to St. Dom's of the Catholic League. We have a C matchup of Valhalla at Albertus Magnus. Another C matchup, Woodlands at Rhinebeck. A CD matchup of Irvington at Tuckahoe. Another CD matchup of Haldane at Westlake. A C matchup of Dobbs Ferry at Blindbrook. A B matchup of the Briarcliff Hamilton football program at Byram Hills. We also have a B matchup, Pleasantville at Bronxville. And finally, a C matchup, Putnam Valley at Broughton Harmon. So those are all the games on slate, Mars. Let's go into 6 of them that I want to talk about this week. And the first one's a B matchup. Ardsley 2-0 at Nanuet, who's 1-1. This is a league game. Ardsley had a W versus Hen Hud last week. Nanuet lost at Pleasantville. And if you look historically, Nanuet is 9-6 versus Ardsley, but Ardsley has won 5 straight in this matchup, including a win last year, 35-6. Let's start with Ardsley, right? And actually, is that correct? I thought Nanuet won last year.
I'm pretty sure that Nanuet won last year.
Yeah, so it's not 5.
Yeah.
Nanuet won the last matchup. Excuse me.
I'm pretty sure, yeah.
But maybe we can have our correcting officials out there. But let's start with Ardsley, Mars. They've scored 55 points so far this season. They've only allowed 13 points. So again, Ardsley lost so many players from last year, but they've come out pretty strong so far this season. And offensively, obviously, it starts to me with their backs and skill guys. Mike Vega, he's had a touchdown in 2 straight games. Ben Silverman has also had a touchdown in 2 straight games. And how about Michael Rendy? Last week, 164 yards passing, 2 touchdowns last week. He had a real strong performance. Now, Nanuet, they did give up 3 passing touchdowns last week, which, again, they're not an easy team to run against for Nanuet. We know that Ardsley wants to run the football, so that's obviously going to be the focal point. But there is some opportunities to throw on them, especially if you're going to come out with some trips. I think they could try to take advantage of that and try to out-leverage them. Again, Ardsley likes to attack you multiple ways. They could try to out-leverage them. Also, Jake Parker, he had a kick return touchdown as well. Special teams is going to be a huge focal point as well in this game. Defensively, I've been impressed with this defense. I mentioned that before. They've only allowed 13 points so far this season. Chewy Walks, again, 2 weeks ago, had multiple defensive touchdowns. But there's other guys. Aiden Wells last week had 6 tackles. Avi Jolka, defensive back, 4 tackles. But to me, the guys up front in that front set, I mentioned Aiden Wells. Shane Speckman has been pretty darn good as well, a young defensive lineman. You're going up against some heavy sets in Nanuet. They're going to be feeding the ball to Moran and they're just going to try to be out physical with you, not just running into tackles, but they also like to condense you to run outside. And so it's going to be really important for those edge guys to step up. Mars, what are your thoughts on Ardsley?
Well, first I'll clarify, Ardsley did beat Nanuet last year 35-6 in October, so this was I guess
okay,
this was
so I was
before.
Right.
Yeah, it was 5 straight, because this was before the playoffs had begun, the last game of the playoffs. This was to keep Ardsley had to secure their spot in the playoffs, essentially. So they won against Nanuet, and then they played Bronxville. And
we always go with your gut. Thank you for clarifying.
Yeah. To kind of talk about Ardsley, I think that they have, like you said, they lost a lot of guys from last year, but even that being the case, they still have a pretty, well-rounded team offensively and defensively. I think offensively, I think they do a pretty good job of throwing a lot of different formations at teams and really seeing what fits, and they can hit you in a lot of different ways. I think they've been pretty efficient offensively to kind of do that. I think not as good as last year with the amount of stacked team that they had, but they've been pretty solid, I think, offensively. And defensively, their matchup against Nanuet is going to be very interesting. I think Nanuet is trying to get to the outside, trying to overload sides with tackle overs, end overs, nasty, whatever you want to call it. They're going to send the heat, right? They're going to try to get to the outside, get Moran the ball and let him make some plays. And I think that Ardsley's defense is going to have to really step it up and really keep contained against this Nanuet offense that's really just trying to overpower you. Just get the mismatches against you and get to the outside.
Yeah, when I moved to Nanuet, Mars, offensively, you mentioned it. It's a James Moran show, 85 yards rushing and a touchdown, also had 25 yards receiving. So he had over 100 yards of total offense. But the question is, who else is going to step up, right? And so the other guys around him, they didn't make enough plays last week. Now, they did that in the prior week, and that resulted in wins, right? So the quarterback, Max Felice, is a guy who stepped up a couple weeks ago. It was a bit of a struggle last week, right? So the question is, who is going to step up and help? I know we talk about all these heavy sets, but there's got to be some other people who can step up besides Moran to help this offense. So is it their quarterback, Felice, making it this week? Is it getting the ball to guys like Logan Stemmerman or Luke Flanagan or anybody else who's going to make these kind of important big plays when, again, Moran is a very talented player, but he can't be the superhero every time, right? So there's got to be others who are going to help complement his game and make those big plays. It's going to be really important against an Ardsley team that is young, right? This is a young team. So again, this is a young team that's building confidence. I think, again, they're going to test their strength. They're going to test their physicality, but there's got to be others who got to step up. Defensively, Nanuet overall defensively has been pretty solid, right? And I know last week they gave up 2 touchdowns on ridiculous plays done by Daniel Picard, right? So if you look at the overall structure of Nanuet's defense, they're pretty solid. But what hurt them last week, even though there were some really nice plays by Daniel Picard, they didn't make enough plays on third down, and they didn't make enough plays in the red zone, which is what they're usually strong in, right? And so those are going to be really important this time around for the defense to step up in those specific spots. But overall, this has been a pretty tough unit defensively. So again, if they can continue to play that and be better than they were last week in the red zone, I think they'll be in pretty good shape. But stopping the run is obviously going to be the number one priority for them. But I do think Ardsley is going to try to test them in the secondary at times. Mars, what are your thoughts on Nanuet?
Yeah, I think Nanuet is obviously a solid team. And I think last week against Pleasantville, it was obviously a tough outing. I think the fact that Moran is the guy, I think everyone knows that he's going to really set the offense. I mean, wherever he lined up is basically where the ball was going, whether he was getting the ball himself or to side wherever he was at, because he's the best player, I think, on the team in general. But like you said, it's really going to be dependent on who's going to be the next guy up, right? The next guy is going to step up and make a play. So this offense is, going to try to outman people, right? But the question is, if it's not Moran, then who's going to help set the tone for this offense? Defensively, I agree with you. I think they've been pretty solid. I just think that obviously Pleasantville had some really big plays and they capitalized it. But overall, Nanuet had kind of failed in the key thing that made them very good in the beginning week. And basically, I think the fact that they were, they bent too much, I guess, at certain points, and they didn't really allow for their defense to make a big play or really stop anything. Stop Pleasantville on third down, right? I think that's kind of the thing you mentioned here. They need to stop the run. They need to make sure that they force Ardsley into really tough scenarios and really try to bring heat to cause a turnover of some kind.
Listen, my matchup to watch, I'm looking at their quarterback, Michael Rendy of Ardsley versus this Nanuet secondary. And I thought Nanuet overall has been pretty solid, but the secondary gave up a couple big pass plays last week. And look for them to step up this time around against a young quarterback. It's going to be an interesting dynamic. All right, Mars, let's go to the next game I want to break down, and that is a Hudson Valley Football League game. Hastings 1-2 at Edgemont, who's 1-1. This is a league game. Hastings lost to Tappan Zee. Edgemont won versus Peekskill. And if you look historically, these two teams have played each other a bunch. Edgemont is 8-2 versus Hastings, but they last played in the COVID year. So let's start with Hastings. Very tough performance last week against a bigger school in Tappan Zee. It was a struggle on both sides of the ball. Offensively, we know what they like to do. They want to get out on the edge. They want to have their playmakers with the ball in their hands in some space. You're going to see a bunch of spread. They rely on their quarterback, Kennedy, who's kind of the orchestrator of that. I know their wide receiver, Unger, was big for them a couple weeks ago. Hastings just has to be a little bit more efficient. They have to, again, not turn the ball over at times. They make these huge mistakes that set their offense back. And so I'm looking at this offense to be efficient, be more efficient than they were last week, obviously, and to get their playmakers the ball in space. That's going to be the big thing because they have some guys. The next question is, how beat up is Hastings, right? That's another factor going into this game that, again, we don't get any injury reports or anything like that, but I thought they got beat up pretty good last week, so I'm interested to see, how they come out this time around. I think they step up a little bit offensively. Defensively, listen, they gave up over 300 yards rushing last week. That can't happen again, right? The Edgemont has a pretty strong rushing attack as well. They have to be stronger up front, stronger in the front seven. They can't allow that many rushing yards. It keeps their offense on the sideline, and it puts their defense in a huge bind, so they're going to have to step up. Mars, what are your thoughts on Hastings?
Yeah, I think Hastings obviously needs to be more efficient overall, and I think they are really kind of putting themselves in a really tough spot because offensively, I think they, like you said, they struggled. I think they need to really step it up, limit the amount of big plays that they're giving up here. And I think offensively, the question or concern that I have is the health, right? How healthy are they, and how many other key guys are missing? I think the offensive line needs to step up big time here for the offense, and it's going to be really interesting to see what happens in this matchup.
Yeah. Let's go to Edgemont, Mars. Offensively, listen, the rush attack was strong. I mentioned that before. They have a couple guys who can run the ball. Sato, Alinkos, and their quarterback, G. Leonardo, is another guy who could throw the ball and run it. So he's kind of that dual threat guy. And they did a pretty good job of attacking off tackle and on the edge last week. Look for them to try to do that again this time around. I believe they will be. I think that's going to be the formula. And when they get the ball running, that's when the play action is going to open up. And they're going to take some big shots down the field. I thought Edgemont did a pretty good job last week. Offensively, they've been pretty solid. But that run, to me, it starts with that rush attack. Defensively, listen, they have an aggressive defense. They want to blitz. They want to create some negative plays. They want to get to your quarterback. I mentioned Alinkos on offense. I thought he was really strong defensively. He had a couple sacks. But it's up to this defensive line and outside linebackers to continue to bring pressure and put Hastings into bad situations, which will give them opportunities to create turnovers. It starts from those negative plays. Edgemont is very aggressive. They're not going to sit back. They don't want to allow Hastings to sit in the pocket and throw to their targets in open field. So they're going to be coming after us, or after Hastings, excuse me. And I think that's kind of the game plan, Mars. What are your thoughts on Edgemont?
Yeah, look at Edgemont. I think that they've been pretty effective running the ball, and I think that you look at multiple different ways for them to attack you. I think G. Leonardo has been very good so far this season. I think he needs to really step it up big time. And obviously, when you're looking at this defense, I think the biggest thing is going to be, like you said, creating some disruption, creating some negative plays, and then trying to force a turnover with some heat, right? So I think that's going to be kind of the key thing we're looking at with Edgemont on this game.
On my matchup, I'm looking at this Edgemont rush attack. Again, Hastings struggled to stop the run last week. Edgemont's going to look to try to take advantage of that, and Hastings' defensive front seven, do they step up? That's going to be the matchup I'm looking at. Let's go to the next matchup, Mars. Another Hudson Valley Football League game. Spring Valley 1-1 at Greely, who's 2-1. Spring Valley lost a tough game versus Ramapo. Greely won at Portchester. And when you look historically, Spring Valley is 3-2 versus Horace. Greely, they last played in 2017, where Spring Valley won 16-13, I believe it was. But let's start with Spring Valley. Offensively, this rush attack has been very good so far. I like this rush attack. It's been pretty strong. Running with Noah Chambers, who, again, not a very big guy, but he runs with some heart. I mean, he runs a lot bigger than where he is. And he runs with some toughness. I mean, he's got solid speed to him, but he runs with some toughness and some physicality, which I like. And I do think, hey, they want to try to hand him the ball as much as possible, rely on their speed, probably get out on the edge a little bit. And their quarterback, Jaden Scott, is going to be really important for him to be efficient throwing the football. But it all starts with the rush attack, in my opinion. I think that's where they can find some success and the play action stuff out of that with Scott. Defensively, listen, you're dealing with the spread of Greely. They do a really good job off of play action. So the defense backs got to be disciplined. They can't just jump up for the run. Have to be prepared for RPOs. They have to be prepared for play action pass, which has been really strong for them. And they got to be able to tackle in space. So it's going to be really important. Again, don't give up those big plays. They like to be very aggressive. They like to blitz. But those DBs at times will be on an island, and they have to have good eye discipline. Marsh, what are your thoughts on Spring Valley?
Yeah, I feel like offensively, they have some really good rush offense going for them. I think they've been very efficient. Jaden Scott needs to be better, and I think he needs to be more efficient just overall as a player. But I really think the way that this defense plays is really what's going to get their offense more time on the field because of the fact that Spring Valley is that I guess you would call it like the high risk, high reward defense. They're going to send the heat, right? It comes with that expectation that the secondary is going to be put on an island in a lot of cases. But this front needs to land on those blitzes and needs to cause some issues for opposing offenses because of the fact that if they can do this, it can cause a turnover and then they can capitalize on that, hopefully in the red zone for them.
Yeah, and when I moved to Greely, Mars offensively, Julian Osh, he's had some pretty strong games. 3 touchdown passes last week, and I thought he was really good. I mentioned off of play action. Play action was really strong. Create some big plays, some RPO stuff. They have a couple running backs in Edenbaum and McKinney. So I'm interested to see if they're going to try to establish the run a little bit. But I think Spring Valley is going to be very aggressive. They're going to bring a lot of stunts. I don't think it's going to be easy running the ball too much. So I think the play action in the quick game, in the pass game, and I think Osh could have a huge one this week because he's got some weapons, right? Hassert, Meehan, Blakesley. I mean, you could see them hit some big plays and some quick ones and get those receivers to make those plays out on an island, right, is going to be another thing that I think really has done a pretty good job. I like how the offense has looked so far. Defensively, obviously the number one priority is to stop Noah Chambers and this rush attack that's been really strong. Can they handle the speed of Spring Valley? Spring Valley's got some fast kids. Will they defend the edge well enough is going to be a huge question mark for Greely. But I like the way Greely's playing. I think this is going to be a really intriguing matchup, Mars. But obviously the number one priority is stopping that run and stopping them from getting to the edge.
Yeah, I mean, we look at Horace Greely. I think their offense has been very good. I think their rush offense has been efficient. I think they need to basically continue this going forward. And I think the problem is going to be, though, that I think you mentioned this already, that Spring Valley is going to send the heat. Right? They're going to try to overload the box to stop the run because of how well Greely's been doing it. So the question is going to be, how are they going to combat that? It's going to be play after pass, it's going to be quick passes. I mean, whatever it is, they need to do it, and they need to do it well. Because Spring Valley is going to send the heat, try to cause some issues with this offense. And for Greely, I think they have to try to stop the run, try to keep it contained, because if Spring Valley gets in the open, their playmakers are going to make some plays.
Yeah, I mean, that's my matchup, Mars. I'm looking at this Greely offensive line and their pass protection versus these stunts from Spring Valley. How they match up, how they identify it, and how they attack it is going to be a huge part of this. Let's go to the next matchup, Mars. This is a CD matchup, and it's Irvington 1-1 at Tuckahoe, who's 2-0. Irvington won versus Ryanek last week. Tuckahoe won versus Dobbs Ferry, and historically, Tuckahoe 2-0 versus Irvington. Last time they played was in 2019. So let's start with Irvington, Mars. Offensively, how about the start to the season so far for running back Marcus Cant? He has over 100 yards in 2 straight games. He had 3 touchdowns last week. He is the engine of this offense, and this is a guy who is explosive. He runs hard, and Coach raved about him before the season, and he has come out of the gate being an invaluable part of this offense, and he's done a really good job. I mean, he's had a strong season so far, and they're going to continue to feed him the ball because he's got to carry the load versus a tough Tuckahoe team. But they're going to have to run the ball. And, last week they did give up around 200 yards of rushing offense. Again, Dobbs Ferry is a heavy run team, so, that's kind of expected. But can have some rushing success. It's going to be up to him in that offensive line. But how about their quarterback, Morgan Balkin, one of the best kickers in this class. But a quarterback, Mars, pretty damn efficient. 12 of 16, 158 yards and a touchdown. Threw that touchdown to Finn Clearly, who's a big-bodied receiver, or long, tall receiver, excuse me. And their wide receiver, Alex Schrader, he had 6 catches over 100 yards. They have some weapons, but it starts with the running game, which will open things up overall. And we know Tuckahoe is probably going to be bailing out to stop Marcus. So can they hit some shots? Can Morgan kind of make some plays with his arm is going to be huge. Defensively, listen, you're up against a high-powered offense, Mars. We know Tuckahoe's offense has multiple guys who can hurt you. But the big thing to me, you're not going to stop everybody, but if they can keep Annunziata in the pocket, I think it'll go a long way for this defense. Mars, what are your thoughts on Irvington?
Yeah, I think Irvington's offense has been really efficient. I think that, the way that Marcus has been running the ball has been really impressive. And obviously that's going to be the priorities. Try to hit these runs and get some big plays. But obviously, I think, in my opinion, the offensive line is really the key to watch. I think they're going to have to really play really well here and just move bodies around to get some lanes with their backs. And obviously, defensively, it's going to be tough. I mean, Tuckahoe's got a very efficient offense. But I think a lot of it has to do with trying to force some turnovers, allow for Irvington to kind of get the ball back on offense, and just really start establishing a run. We're trying to control the momentum and tempo of this game, and obviously get Marcus the ball again. So I think that they have the ability to do it, but we got to see.
Let's go to Tuckahoe, Mars, and boy, Tuckahoe I think is playing as well as any team that I've seen so far. Watching on tape. Tuckahoe has had wins, Mars, versus Dobbs Ferry and Westlake in back-to-back weeks. And for a D school, that is extremely impressive. And they deserve a lot of credit. They're playing at a high level. And offensively, Mars, we know it starts with their quarterback, Annunziata. 16 of 23, Mars, 233 yards, 2 touchdowns. He also had 35 yards rushing and a touchdown. Did throw a pick, but last week, he was awesome. I thought he was pretty awesome for the majority of what I saw. And again, he's had a really strong first 2 weeks of the season. And he is a vocal point of that offense and kind of the igniter for them, and he's got to continue to do that. But he's not alone. I mean, their running back, Smith, Mars, he also had 55 yards rushing and 2 touchdowns, also caught 3 catches, 34 yards and a touchdown. This is a compact runner who shows some of that versatility that he can catch the ball out of the backfield. But Connor Banke, he had 7 receptions over 100 yards. Jake Matarazzo, 3 receptions for 62 yards. We know John Banke had a receiving touchdown. I mean, they have some firepower there on that offense, and you're seeing that now for 2 straight weeks. But that engine is Annunziata, getting him running the ball, getting him outside the pocket where he can make plays. That's the formula. I mean, that formula is not changing, and I think they're going to find similar success this week. Defensively, obviously, stopping Marcus of Irvington is going to be huge. They held Brian Mars last week to 40 yards. Now, granted, they did give up around 200 yards rushing, and Holman had over 100 yards. But, they wanted to take away Brian Dan. They did a decent job of that. And so I think that's kind of going to be the focus again this week, and force others to beat them, right? Force the passing game to beat them, force some of these receivers to make plays. But they can't let Marcus beat them, right? That's got to be the goal. And, I think that's going to be the priority, Mars. What are your thoughts on Tuckahoe?
Yeah, I think that they've been very impressive lately. I think Annunziata is going to be the guy that kind of pushes the game going forward. I think, this offense in general is just super explosive, and I think that the biggest thing for me is the offensive line, the open lanes, this brush offense. And I think that if they could do that, it's really going to just really carry carry the game forward in this offense. For Tuckahoe is going to be just dominant. And defensively, I agree with you. I think that you really have to slow down Marcus Cannon, and I think that you have the ability to do that, but it's going to be tough because he's just a talented player. I think that if you can slow him down and force other people to really step up and beat you, that's going to go a long way to help you win.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's go to the next matchup, Mars, before we go to our game of the week. It's a B matchup. Pleasantville 2-0 at Bronxville, who's 1-2. This is a league matchup. Pleasantville won versus Nanuet last week. Bronxville won versus the Barclay Hamilton football program. And historically, Pleasantville 7-1 versus Bronxville. They have won 6 straight. But these last 2 meetings, Mars, have been pretty close. 25-22 and 14-7. Right? So, this has kind of been a close matchup between these 2 schools recently. And let's start with Pleasantville. Offensively, We know that man, Houdini, the magician, whatever you want to call him. I mean, I have multiple nicknames. Daniel Picard, right? 164 yards rushing. He also had 3 catches for 77 yards and 2 touchdowns, 2 impressive touchdowns, one at the end of half that really changed the momentum of that game last week for Pleasantville. He's had over 100 rushing yards now in 2 straight games, but he wasn't alone, right? And I think Aiden Picard, the quarterback, 10 of 13, Mars, 144 yards, 3 touchdowns, obviously 2 of them to Daniel, but the efficiency there, that was very impressive to me because we've always focused, similar to what I said about Nanuet, was what I say about Pleasantville, is who outside of Daniel is going to step up. And this last week, it was his brother, Aiden, and he made a couple of really, he was efficient. He didn't put the ball in harm's way too often. He took what the defense gave you, and he made some big throws. Eric Coleman's another guy who's been a reliable target. McDermott and Lou Sadao, he had that other receiving touchdown last week. So you're seeing other guys step up, and that to me changes this Pleasantville team if you can get that consistent. It's going to have to continue going forward against Bronxville, who they have some good linebacker play and defensive linemen. They have some size to them, right? So I think Aiden Picard's going to have to throw the ball, and he's going to have to hit some plays. We know Daniel Picard's going to get a bunch of touches, right? And moving Daniel Picard around, I think, is also another important thing. When they put him at receiver, they put him at running back, it cocks the defense over to him and allows one-on-one opportunities for other people. So that kind of dynamic is an important one, but others got to make plays. Defensively, I thought the defensive line, Mars, was much more physical last week than they were the prior week. I thought they were more disruptive. They had, 3 sacks. Ryan Horrigan continues to play at a high level at the linebacker spot. And I do think Bronxville, although they're in a heavy spread, and a lot of teams are expecting them to just throw the ball, I think they're going to spread to try to run it because they have a couple of running backs who can run. And so Ryan Horrigan and his defensive front is going to have to play big and try to generate pressure, which they do a pretty good job of at the start of the season. Marsh, what are your thoughts on Pleasantville?
Yeah, Pleasantville, first off, from the offensive perspective, we know Daniel Picard is obviously top-level talent, but like you said, and I think I said this last week too, that in order for this offense to really progress and get better, it's really going to depend on other key players to step up. And you can kind of see that last week, where Pleasantville had basically, I think all around was a solid win from all standpoints. And I think that when you're looking at it, obviously Aiden Picard had played a very, very good game, very efficient, no turnovers, and I think the biggest thing is going to be seeing that going forward. You see that consistently going forward. Eric Coleman and Evan McDermott definitely stepped up, and Lewis Dow being a younger guy, sophomore pull-up that basically had a big play when they needed to help secure the win. But like you said, it's going to be an all-around effort on offense because the offensive line is going to have to step it up. Right? They're going to have to keep playing at a high rate. Defensively, Ryan Horrigan's been playing out of his world. He's been all over the field, making so many tackles. But this defensive line has been really impressive too. I think that when you're looking at the scheme, they're setting the heat, right? So they're putting a lot of onus on their secondary, and the secondary is just stepping up. I mean, Michael Hodzinski's basically been playing very well. I always butcher his name somehow, some way. So I think that he's doing very well defensively. I think that you have a lot of guys like Cooper Kitsley who's been playing well, and enter those tackle spots. So I think you have a lot of guys who are stepping up on offense and defensively. And I think that it's going to be really kind of impressive to see how they continue this going forward, and whether or not these skill players on the offensive end will step up again.
Yeah, definitely. Let's go to Bronxville, Mars. Offensively, listen, they come out with a lot of speed, a lot of tempo, but to me, when it comes to Bronxville, it's coming with that fast pace and using the numbers and leverage to your advantage, but also playing with control, right? So you want to get fast, to get lined up, right? Hike the ball, get the defense on their heels, but you also want to be in control where you're not, frantically playing, right? And that's kind of when mistakes happen. But they have a couple backs in Newton and Mason. Newton's kind of that slasher. Mason's kind of that bulkier, run downhill running back. They can run the ball, right? And I think they're going to have to run the ball to not put their quarterback into bad situations against this Pleasantville defense who brings pressure, right? So they can run the ball. And this offensive line, Mars, has some size to it, right? If they can stay on blocks, if they can move their feet, they have size. right? So it's up to, can they handle some of the physicality and speed of Pleasantville? And if they could, they'll have opportunities to run the ball, which is tough to do versus this Pleasantville front. But I'm interested to see, again, Luke Stevens is a guy I didn't see much of last week. Don't know his status. He is a big-bodied, important receiver for this offense, a guy who can win those one-on-one matchups. So, again, what is the status of him? What are the status of other guys? Pierce Patterson, again, moving on to the wide receiver spot, kind of moving around. What does this quarterback situation look like, right? There's some questions that Bronxville, that we're still learning about Bronxville, but last week, Mars scored over 50 points. I mean, they put up a lot of points last week, so this offense can be very explosive. But to me, it's got to start with some of this physical running game to put them in some better situations. Defensively, listen, every week I talk about who plays Pleasantville, they have to stop Daniel Picard. It's really hard to stop him, right? And you're always expecting at least one play a week that he does some Houdini magician trick that a lot of other people in the class can't do, right? But again, it's about limiting him. I think if you get Daniel Picard at 120 yards or less, I think you have a real chance of winning. That's where I think the marker is. But if he breaks that over 120 yards total, that's when you're in bad shape, right? Because he makes life easier for those guys around him, right? So if you can make it tough and put kind of the pressure on those other guys to make plays, that is the best chance against Pleasantville's offense. Now, defensively, it's always a grind to run against them, always the grind. But to me, I just think if you can hit a couple pass plays and continue to control the time of possession, I do think it's in your favor. But, that's kind of my thought on Bronxville. Mars, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think they're a fast-paced team. They have some really good skill players. Obviously, like Newton and Mason are both really good running backs that have really good compliments to one another. But the big thing I have is the health issue. I mean, you don't know who's out, who's in. Because like I said, we don't get any injury reports before games or anything. So I think the big thing is that we have to see how this offensive line is going to perform against this strong front seven that Pleasantville has. And I think defensively, obviously, you kind of said it best, trying to stop or limit what Daniel Picard will do. I think the big question is going to be stopping the secondary receivers, the guys other than Daniel Picard. Because if you kind of focus on Daniel Picard, you have to have those one-on-one plays, and your secondary is going to have to step it up.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm looking at that matchup for me is this Bronxville edge defenders in the secondary versus Daniel Picard. Again, haven't seen it yet this year. Daniel Picard has gotten to the edge, made some huge plays out on the edge. Will there be a defense that can bottle him up and kind of force him into the front seven of Bronxville, who at the linebacker core I think is pretty strong? All right, Mars, let's get to the game of the week. And this week's game of the week is a CD matchup. Mars, Haldane 2-0 at Westlake, who is 1-1. And Haldane won versus Albertus Magnus last week. Westlake won versus Putnam Valley. Westlake is 2-0, but the last time, 2-0 against Haldane, last time they played, Mars, 2008, 14 years ago. Let's start with Haldane. Listen, offensively, 33 points so far this season. It's kind of been up and down, but defensively, 23 points allowed. Defense has been strong again. They had a strong defense last year. Coach has done a really good job defensively. But offensively, Mars, obviously, to me, it starts with their running back, Evan Gianchinta. When he gets going, things really open up for this offense. But they also have a talented quarterback, Ryan Van Tassel. He was 9 of 18, and the efficiency is not the greatest, but 103 yards passing, 2 passing touchdowns, hit some big ones. Thomas Tucker had 2 receiving touchdowns last week. He had a very strong week, Thomas Tucker. This offense, to me, if Evan Gianchinta can get going, this offensive line is going to be up against a fast defense up front. They can run the ball with some physicality. It makes life easier for Van Tassel, who can hit those big plays. He can also run some as well. Defensively, Mars, last week they only allowed 119 yards of offense. They forced 3 turnovers. This defense has been pretty darn strong so far this season. And, their defensive back, Thomas Tucker, an INT, 2 forced fumbles, really was a player of the week type of play last week for him. And stopping this rush attack of Westlake with a lot of speed is the number one priority. And if this Haldane front seven can match the speed of Westlake, they're going to have a chance. I think they'll have a chance in this game if that defensive front seven can handle the kind of the rush attack out on the edge for Westlake. Mars, what are your thoughts on Haldane?
Yeah, I think when you're looking at the offense, a lot of us have run through, Evan Gianchinta, I think is one of his name. But yeah, basically, I think that when you're looking at this offense, they have a lot of abilities to make big plays. But in my opinion, it has to do a lot with the offensive line. They need to open up lanes. They need to really establish the run and really control the line of scrimmage to allow for, whether what you're trying to establish the run first, or even open up later with pass, play action, or just the pass in general. The offensive line needs to step it up, right? And defensively, I think it's going to be the same thing, but the other way. I think the front seven is going to be tested quite often against Westlake's rush offense. So just because of how efficient they are. So the question I just have is, whoever can win the trenches, who's going to do it, and whoever does is going to control the game.
Yeah, and I want to go to Westlake Mars offensively. Definitely a good bounce back performance by the quarterback Michael Pagan. Much more efficient this week. 6 of 8, 102 yards and a touchdown. Also 58 yards rushing and a touchdown. He's another dual threat guy. Very important for this offense and the balance of this offense. But they have multiple guys. We talked about it. You're kind of going to see running backs step up almost each week. Pagan, this was a guy dual threat, but they Oshi Pinty. He had 69 yards rushing in the touchdown, and he's now a touchdown in 2 straight games. And another guy, right? Chris Callett, 6 carries, 64 yards and a touchdown. Mars. He was a guy I talked about in the preseason, transferring over back to Westlake. He's another guy that you can give the ball to, and he can make some big plays for you. But they have multiple backs who can do that. And so some weeks you might see this name come up. Some weeks you might see this name come up. It's really interesting that Westlake has these kind of guys who have some speed to them. But I think these guys to keep an eye out for, especially guys like Pagan, who's his efficiency passing the ball really creates a new dynamic for this offense. And I think that's the formula. Run, and play action out of it, right? Run, play action out of it, right? I think that's going to be really important. Have that efficiency, 6 of 8 passing. If they pass for less than 12 times, I think they're in good shape. Defensively, I think generating pressure on Ryan Van Tassel is going to be extremely important, Mars. This offensive line, I think the defensive front has some speed to it. I think these outside linebackers have some speed to it. Can Haldane's front handle it? I don't know. It's going to be a tough task. And if Westlake can generate pressures, that's where the turnovers come in, giving their offense the ball. And Westlake's that kind of offense, Mars, that can drain an entire quarter, right? Them running the ball, they can really drain a clock and have that offense rusty on the sideline. I think is going to be big. Mars, what are your thoughts on Westlake?
Yeah, I thought they were overall offensively playing very well. They have a lot of running backs that can make a lot of plays, and I'm going to give a lot of a big shout out to Chris Callett. I mean, he was playing very well. And he was. You mentioned him earlier in the offseason with his transferring from Kennedy Catholic back to Westlake, and he's been playing very well. But it's not just him. There's actually a multitude of guys who have been playing well together, and the offensive line has been stepping up a lot. Defensively, I feel like it's going to be tough, but I think the front four needs to capitalize on, sending the pass rush. But if they do send blitzes, they need to land on them, right? It's that high risk, high reward, but every time they blitz, they got to land on it, right? It's good because if they don't, it's going to be really difficult for them to slow down the pacing of this game. And you said, if they get the ball back, they can really control the time of possession so well. That they'll be able to drain out any defensive energy that they have. So that's going to be the big question I have, whether or not they can accomplish this or not. And a lot of it has to do with defense.
Let's get to our keys, Mars. My keys to the game. The first one is the edge of both sides of the ball. Right, Westlake versus Haldane. Who controls the edge of this? Of the edge of the field, right? I think Westlake is going to really attack the edge of this. They believe they have a speed advantage, in my opinion. I think they're going to try to test Haldane's speed. And if Haldane can control in the defensive front seven, keep them bottled in between the tackle box, I think they have the better chance, right? But if they get out on the edge, Pagan gets out on the edge, Kali gets out on the edge, that's bad news. So we're going to see what happens on that one. My second one is pass attempts, Mars. Both these teams, again, I mentioned Ryan Van Tassel, 9 of 18, right? If he has, I think, 20 or less, Haldane is going to throw it a little bit more. But if he has 20 or less, I think they're in pretty good shape. And if Pagan has 15 or less, I think Westlake's in a lot of good shape, right? So pass attempts, I think if they go over those marks, I think that means they're trailing. I think that means they're trying to catch up, and I think they're in a bad situation. But again, if they get under those marks, I think they're going to be pretty good. Mars, do you have a matchup?
I really think it's just the fronts, man. I really think that if It's going to be Westlake's front seven. Obviously, taking on Haldane's offensive line, seeing who's going to get the advantage there. I think that's going to be the big thing for me. I'm always looking for offensive line, defensive line, but yeah, this is going to be definitely a big.
I have reversed. I have the Westlake rush attack versus Haldane's front seven that I mentioned a few times. Obviously, I think that one to me is an important matchup. My player to watch, Mars, running back and defensive end, Evan Gianchinta of Haldane. Very important two-way player. Really strong player for them. He's going to have to be huge in this game if Haldane wants to pull the upset. All right, Mars, you ready for the game picks?
I'm ready to roll, man.
All right, real quick. Last week, I went 10-5. Mars went 10-4, and our friends over at Lohud went 11-4. And our totals, Mars, I'm 23-7. You're 22-6, and our friends at Lohud are 22-8. So, yeah, let's keep it up. We're all doing pretty good. Let's start it off, Mars. B matchup, Ardsley 2-0 at Nanuet, who's 1-1. We broke this game down earlier. I'm going to go with Nanuet. I think Nanuet breaks that win streak that Ardsley has. Ardsley is still a young team. I think they haven't met a more physical team than Nanuet so far this season. They're going to get a strong dosage of that. I think James Moran is the best player out on that field. I think he makes one or two plays that Ardsley cannot account for. I'm going with Nanuet.
Yeah, I'm going to agree. I think Nanuet's going to win this game. I think they had a tough outing last week. Pleasantville's defense is really good, so I really think that this week they're going to have a kind of a different scenery. They're going to be out there at their home. I think the turf field is not coming out for another week and a half based on the intel I researched. So I think that they are going to have their home turf yet, but it's still going to be a home field game, which is going to be big for them. And I think they're going to kind of have the momentum on their side of going Nanuet.
Let's talk about a Hudson Valley Football League game. Peekskill 0-2 at Walter Panis, 2-1. Mars, let me just say this about Walter Panis. That combo of running back Paul Ronga, who had 119 yards and 2 touchdowns last week, and Carlucci had 125 yards rushing in the touchdown. Also had a punt return touchdown. He was also 6-7, 77 yards in the touchdown. That duo right there is a pretty deadly one. But what impresses me more, defensively, they've allowed 13 or less points in 2 straight weeks. Dan Leonard is at it now. What is it? He's been pretty solid for them. They had 3 sacks, 2 turnovers last week as a whole. I'm going Walter Panis, not White Plains. Walter Panis to win this game. Again, I really like what I saw from the combo right there. And defensively, they've been pretty solid.
Yeah, I'm also going to go Walter Panis, not White Plains. I think...
Did I say it was Peekskill at White Plains?
You said no. You said Peekskill versus Walter Panis. No, I'm just saying you said White Plains before. That's why I'm also picking Walter Panis, not White Plains. So yeah, I'm gonna go Walter Panis. I think, like you said, they do have a deadly combination. Peekskill, I think, is just still kind of establishing the program. So I think that they just have Walter Panis just has more. So I'm gonna go Walter Panis.
Yes, Walter Panis is winning this game, in my opinion. Let's go to another Hudson Valley Football League game. Kingston 1-1 at Tappan Zee, who's 2-1. This is a hard one. Kingston, again, not very familiar with them, but Tappan Zee over 300 yards rushing last week. Mars O'Hara 144 yards, Brown 106 yards, McCarthy 87 yards. Defensively, they forced 2 turnovers. I like the way Tappan Zee's been playing the last couple of weeks. I know they lost a couple of weeks ago, but their rush attack has been pretty strong. I'm going with Tappan Zee.
Yeah, I'm also going to go with Tappan Zee. I think that they've been on a roll lately, so I'm going to go with Tappan Zee just because I think the momentum's on their side.
Hudson Valley Football League game, Mars. Hastings 1-2 at Edgemont, who's 1-1. We broke this game out earlier. Again, not sure, how beat up Hastings is. Again, how efficient this offense is going to step up this offensive line. I'm going Edgemont. Again, Hastings really struggled to stop the run. Edgemont rush attack has been pretty solid. I think Edgemont's going to make a couple plays. I think they win this game.
I'm going with Hastings. I think Hastings is going to go into Edgemont. They're going to pull the upset here. They're going to take away the home field advantage. I'm going Hastings.
All right, let's go to another Hudson Valley Football League game. Spring Valley 1-1 at Horace, Greely 2-1. This one was a hard one for me. I think these teams are pretty evenly matched. I really like the way quarterback from Greely, Osh, has been playing. But I'm going to go with the speed of Spring Valley. I think Spring Valley rebounds after a tough loss last week. I think they run the ball. I'm going to go with Spring Valley in the tight one.
Yeah, I was actually leaning towards Spring Valley as well. I think the fact is I actually had them being the I guess, the HVFL champions. So I'm going to go stick by my guns here. I'm going to Spring Valley.
Well, stop jinxing them, man. Keep saying that every week. Let's go to the next matchup. B matchup. Pearl River 0-2 at Hen Hut, who's 0-2. This is a league game. Listen, I think Hen Hut defensively really stepped up last week against Ardsley for the most part. It's about consistency. It feels like, again, offensively, can they continue to get things going into a rhythm? Defensively, I thought they took a step in the right direction, but I like the physicality that Pearl River plays with. I think they got some size up front, and they can run the ball at times. And, Espinal, he had 208 yards and 2 touchdowns. Guys like Perez and McMullen, can they make some plays in the passing game? They don't pass it a lot. It's a lot of heavy run stuff. This game, again, could be another quick one with two teams heavily trying to run the football. But I think Pearl River makes enough plays. I think defensively, Donahue had 8 tackles last week for him, had 9 tackles. Leon Nazaj is a guy who made some plays for them last week. I think they do enough defensively, and they run the ball efficiently. Pearl River's going to win this one.
Yeah, I'm also going to go Pearl River. I think they played very tough the last few weeks. They basically are in a mode where they need to kind of pull away with a victory here. Hen Hut has had some struggles. I'm going to go Pearl River.
Hudson Valley Football League, Portchester 0-3 at Poughkeepsie, who's 0-2. I think both these teams trying to figure out offensively some consistency. It's been really tough for both offenses. To me, it's about offensive line play, right? Which one's going to play better? It's always tough for me to decide between these two teams. But I'm going to go, because they're so evenly matched, the home team. I'm going with Poughkeepsie on this one. Being at home, I think they make enough plays. But it wouldn't surprise me. This is kind of a coin flip for me, but I'm going with Poughkeepsie.
Yeah, I'm going to go this. I'm actually going to go Portchester. I'm thinking the same thing about that. It's a coin flip. I think that Portchester's going to pull up the upset going into Poughkeepsie and pulling away with a W. I'm going to go Portchester.
Another Hudson Valley Football League team, Ramapo, 2-1, going to St. Dom's over in Long Island. And this is always a really tough travel for these Westchester schools. But let me tell you this about Ramapo. Rashawn Griffin, Mars, he had 250 yards total offense, 3 touchdowns last week. Nico Sanchez was a big play guy for them. He had 3 catches, 95 yards and a touchdown. But how about Bellholm? 9 tackles, 2 tackles for loss. I thought Ramapo really played strong against Spring Valley. And if they continue that, they bring that consistency with them, I think it'll travel. I'm going to go with Ramapo.
Yeah, I'm also going to go with Ramapo. I think that they have some talent behind them. I think that they're, the ride's going to stink, but I think Ramapo is going to win here.
C matchup, Valhalla 2-0 at Albertus Magnus, who's 0-2. This is a league game. Listen, Albertus Magnus has really struggled offensively. I thought defensively they've been pretty solid to start the season, especially in the secondary. They've limited big plays. But, man, they're going up against a Valhalla team that is extremely explosive. Basiaka Butcher, 3 touchdowns last week. Cooper had a touchdown reception. Boyset, 2 touchdowns. That trio is really tough to handle. And their quarterback, Brendan O'Neill, 210 total yards last week with 3 touchdowns. They can get consistency at the quarterback spot. Again, we've seen it. Valhalla has really started the season very explosive. They make a bunch of plays defensively. Albertus Magnus is still trying to figure it out offensively. I'm going to go with Valhalla.
Yeah, I'm going to agree. Valhalla has been very efficient, very explosive of a team, offensively and defensively. I'm going to go Valhalla. I think they have more here.
Another C matchup, Woodlands, 1-2 at Rhinebeck, who's 0-2. This is a league matchup, Mars. Woodlands, first win for Coach Bascom last week, Mars, and it's also the first win for the program in, I think, 3 years. Listen, I looked at their quarterback, Gabriel. He was 9-10 for 208 yards, 3 touchdowns last week. Atkins, Gabriel, making plays for them. Their running back, Gonzalez, he had over 140 total yards and 2 touchdowns. Listen, first win in 3 years. I think they get their second this week. I'm going to go with Woodlands.
I'm going to go with Rhinebeck. I think that Rhinebeck's at home. I'm going to give them the home field advantage. As much as Woodlands, winning a game is great for their coach, the first win for the coach. The first win in what you said, 3 years. I think the momentum is on Rhinebeck's side. They're playing at home. I'm going Rhinebeck.
Let's do another CD matchup. Irvington 1-1 at Tuckahoe, who's 2-0. Listen, I like Irvington. They also have a tough grittiness to them. The coaches have done a pretty solid job over there at Irvington. But Tuckahoe is just playing at a different level right now. I think Tuckahoe is, again, been extremely efficient offensively. Defensively, they have stepped up. I was impressed with how they played Dobbs Ferry last week. I'm going to go with Tuckahoe.
Yeah, I'm going to go Tuckahoe as well. I think that Tuckahoe has been kind of dominating offensively and defensively. I think They're just moving the ball all over the place. So I think Tuckahoe's in the right momentum. And on top of that, they're home. So I think they'll go Tuckahoe here.
C matchup, Dobbs Ferry 1-1 at Blindbrook, who's 1-2. This is a league matchup. Both teams trying to bounce back from tough losses. Blindbrook, I was a little surprised on how they played defensively last week. They gave up way too many big plays, and things were way too efficient. I think Blindbrook does step up, but Dobbs Ferry is another team that's looking defensively to step back up again after a tough performance last week. And I think Dobbs Ferry is going to control the time of possession, and I think Dan is going to have a big day. So I'm going to go with Dobbs Ferry.
Yeah, I'm going to go with Dobbs Ferry as well. I feel like they're going to, like you said, control that time of possession, get some positive yards with Dan, and I think they're just going to run the clock out. Once they get some scores up, they're going to slowly drain the clock.
Let's do a B matchup. Mars Briarcliff Hamilton 1-2 at Byram Hills, who's 3-0. As a Briarcliff Hamilton football program, they have also another scrappy team that doesn't give up and they play hard. But Byram Hills is another team that's really humming, Mars. They scored last week on their first 5 possessions, which is pretty crazy. Their quarterback, John Accurso, he's had 2 or more touchdowns now in 3 straight games. Running back Jaworski, I believe he's now rushed over 100 yards in 3 straight games. This offense is really humming. I think it's too much. I'm going with Byram Hills.
Yeah, I agree. I think Byram Hills' offense has been really efficient, really explosive. The defense has been okay. So I think at the end of the day, their offense is going to score a lot of points. I'm going with Byram Hills.
Another C matchup, Putnam Valley 1-1 at Croton Harmon, who's also 1-1. As in Croton Harmon, Jacob Jones, he's had a touchdown now, 2 straight games. I think he's going to have another one. He's going to probably score a couple more times in this one. Ben Reed had a touchdown last week. But the question for me, Croton Harmon, is up front, right? Can they step up front? And defensively, can they prevent those big plays? I think Putnam Valley, their rush attack is very strong with Meister. I'm going to go with Putnam Valley. I think they win the battle up front. And Putnam Valley is going to pull this one out.
Yeah, I'm also going to agree with you. I think Putnam Valley is starting to kind of understand what is their advantage in a lot of these cases. Now, offensively, they're going to be running the ball. I think they're going to go Putnam Valley to kind of give them that win. I think they're going to get there based off of what I've seen so far last week.
B matchup, Pleasantville 2-0 at Bronxville, who's 1-2. Again, another league matchup. Mars, you're not going to pick this game. Any final thoughts, though?
No, I think that generally they have to kind of follow in the same mindset as last game. I think if you're getting some guys to kind of step up that Ardsley card, I think it's going to open up the offense. Defensively, I think that they've been doing very well for the most part, and I think that if they continue doing what they have been, they're going to cause some issues in the backfield, and whether it's pass or run, and I think they're going to get more opportunity for Dave Picard to make the plays.
Listen, I think, again, Bronxville scored a lot of points last week, and they have that firepower that they can do that. I think it's going to be tougher this week, obviously, with the front 7 that Pleasantville has. They're going to bring a lot of pressure, and they're going to force these quarterbacks to make some tough throws. Can Bronxville do that is the question to me. I don't think they'll be able to do it enough, and I'm going to go with Pleasantville again. I think Pleasantville will be able to move the ball against Bronxville. The question is, can Aiden Picard make some throws? I think he will this week. I'm going with Pleasantville. Finally, the game of the week, Mars. Haldane 2-0 at Westlake, was 1-1. This is a CD matchup. Who wins and why?
Well, this is a tough one. I mean, I'm looking at the overall idea of both these teams. I think they have kind of a mixed bag depending on what you're looking at. I think when you're looking at Haldane, I really like the way that Evan Gianchinta basically has been playing. And I think obviously the offensive line is kind of stepping it up, right? I think they have to continue doing that, or else they're not going to be able to move the ball as well. And I think that obviously when you're looking at Westlake, I think they have also kind of a similar attitude of being able to run the ball with several people. I think they have a lot of weapons on the offensive side, trying to get the outside and make big plays. It's going to also depend on the offensive line to open up lanes for other guys as well. I think if I'm going to pick a game to pick the winner, I'd say Westlake. I think Westlake is going to get the advantage. On top of that, I feel like when you're the home team, you kind of get all your juices flowing. So I think Westlake's going to win here.
Again, I really like the way Haldane's defense has been playing. They've now been, pretty aggressive and stout the last season now in 2 games. Coaching staff has done a pretty good job of that. But my concern about Haldane is the consistency offensively. I know Thomas Tucker is a big weapon for them, had a huge game last week. Can they continue to build that repertoire? And can there be other weapons outside of Evan Gianchinta, who I think Westlake is going to try to bail out to slow down? and generate some pressure on Ryan Van Tassel. I don't think Haldane will then have enough offense to beat Westlake, and I'm going to go Westlake. All right, everyone, that was our show. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. We hope you guys enjoy this weekend's games, and we'll see you all very soon.